I'm not going to say it all again though, so someone on your team will have to do that bit. So any questions about that flow chart? So that's generally what we're going to cover off today. The last bit we'll cover off, which I don't have on this flow chart, is about if somebody in team A wants to ask someone in team B about something in regard to a taxpayer. So perhaps somebody in the refunds team wants to know something about an audit, then they can create an inquiry and allocate it to the audit team member to get back to them with the information. Now, I mean, it might be just as easy to do that through email, but if for some reason you want to keep a record of that transaction, then you can do it through the inquiry case as well. We just have to take a few alternate steps, which I'll show you when we do that. All right. Any questions? No questions. So I'm going to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share our, I'm going to share the website. I'm going to go into RMS Web first, and we're going to look, where's RMS Web here? So are you seeing the optimal logins, optimal website at the moment? It says hi Sharon on it?
Yes. Yep.
Great. So we're going to start with in that yellow box that I showed you on the flow chart. So I've already logged into the optimal portal, and you can see that I've got a number of taxpayers here that I'm logged in with access to. So I'm just going to go to one of those. Probably going to time me out now because I have had this open for a little while. Yes, it has. I'll just log back in. Going to be a little bit slower optimal today because I'm not working in our head office, so I'm working on a private network to get back there, so just bear with any of the speed issues we've got today. So we're back to the screen we were looking at before. I'm going to show you a number of places where you can see communications or inquiries or messages between taxpayers and the GRA. So the first thing is I've got 4 taxpayers here that I've got access to, and you can see I've got a summary over here of all the messages in relation to those taxpayers. So this is all the things that have been communicated back and forward recently about those taxpayers. So that's the first place, and at this point it's jumbling them all up because I haven't selected a taxpayer specifically. Now I'm going to go into one taxpayer. I'm just going to go into the Umbrella Academy. And we're just going to do a quick look around all the areas where I can see or send messages to GRA from inside the portal. So over here now we can see the 2 messages that relate just to the Umbrella Academy. So if we open those, we can see that there's 2 unread messages in relation to these 2 cases here. So if I go in, I can see the correspondence in relation to that. So this is an unread message that's come into the portal about this particular taxpayer. And it relates to a refund. And then there's another one that's now, it's only saying one's unread, and this one is also the same thing relating to a different refund when Jono's done some refund cases. So that's the first place you're going to see messages coming in from the GRA, and they're either going to come from inquiry cases or other types of cases. So those particular ones were different types of cases than inquiries. You can see here there's a new message box. So this is one place. All of these things are just different avenues to the same functionality. So from that point there, I can send an email, I can send a message back to the GRA that will create an inquiry case. So that's one place there. If we go into the inbox, it's the same place as what we saw there. but there were no new messages. But these are the things that are in progress. Two of them that started, well, all of them, actually these two started from inside this portal. This one is just showing information in regard to the registration that was initially created. So here I can send a message as well. So there's a number of places, and then down here I can send a message as well. So this will create a new message box. There's other places you can send messages to GRA as well, though. If I go to tax accounts, this is a summary of all the tax periods and their status. So if we look at the top one, VAT, November 2020, the return is due, the due date, there's nothing owing on it yet. I can file a return from here, but you can see linked to every single return period, you can send a message to the GRA as well. So there's loads of ways, doesn't matter where a kind of a taxpayer is in the portal, there's going to be a place where they can send a message about something. So this one, for example, pre-populates the period and year and tax type. So if I chose another one, June 2020, it's going to do the same thing. So all of them open up the same message interface, and this is the message interface that sends an inquiry to GRA. So let's go back to the home page. So if the taxpayer wants to send a message, I mean, they've got a number of options, and it makes no difference whatsoever which one they use. So let's just go to the kind of traditional one, which is the new message. It opens up this new message screen. I think we're going to find this field here. This field here used to be used in our old product, but it's actually going to disappear. So we won't talk. You used to be able to link messages to other cases, and we don't have that now. So it always defaults to new inquiry, and then you choose a subject. The list of subjects is something that GRA can update themselves. So you can add new subjects in, and I'll show you how to do that later. If something new particularly comes up. So for example, you might have introduced some new provisions around COVID-19, new due dates, or some relief to taxpayers around COVID-19. And so you want to add that in as a new reason for the inquiry so that you can track those. So I'll show you how you can do that. You can see Jono's added himself in here at some stage as an inquiry subject. I'll show you how we can do that so that this kind of list is ever flexible. So let's say we're going to do tax clearance certificate question. The next question is, does this relate to a specific tax account? And by that it means tax, not TIN, we're already under the TIN, but it means the tax type, period, and year. So let's just say, yes, it does. It relates to corporate tax, sorry, for 2021. Now you don't have to fill this out, but if you do, it just links this inquiry to this period. Message can be typed in there. I'm not sure how many. I think the box is bigger than this though, so I think you can scroll down. So I think there's quite a lot of room to put whatever messages in. But you can also attach a file. File to that. So this complete message is now going to be sent. When I click send message, it's going to be sent to the back office version of Optimal. And what it will do is it will create an inquiry case and allocate it to somebody. Okay, so this is the follow-up confirmation letter. Notice that says, thank you for your inquiry, and it just gives me the reference number. So the reference number is inquiry 90, so it's always going to be a unique number because that's the number of the case that's been allocated to somebody. So if ever they want to follow up on it, they can follow up using that reference number. Bit of information about what happens next. So you'll now be able to access this message in your inbox. You'll be sent an email when there are updates. We aim to respond within so many working days. If you require any assistance, reply to this message, phone numbers, what's your inquiry about, etc., etc., etc. So if we go to the inbox, we can see that message is in there now. Okay, so we're back up here, inbox. We've added this new one to it. We can open it up and we can see the first transaction in the conversation between GRA and this taxpayer. So this is the first one. This is the one that I just sent. Now, when someone in GRA replies back to this, you'll be able to see that the subsequent steps in that. So the status of this one is in progress. If we star it here, then when we go to here, we'll see it down here on our watched items. So I'm back in the home page, and now I can just keep an eye on it. I don't have to go in and see. I can just see what the progress is, where it's at, if I want to get an update on it. So let's send another one from somewhere else. Let's go into returns. No, let's go into, sorry, my tax accounts, just so that we do it again. So this one relates to, let's say it relates to an extension of time. Does it relate to a specific period? The answer is already defaulted to yes, because it's populated. Second one, no attachments, perhaps this time, just an inquiry. This is going to do the same thing. Assume it's going to give us the next inquiry number. So now we've got inquiry number 91. So if we go into the inbox, you can see that we're tracking 2 inquiries here. So what do you think is happening at the other end inside RMS? Any ideas what's happening at the other end? What would we expect to see inside RMS, inside optimal back office? Any ideas out there? Probably some answers. No answers. All right.
I won't say anything.
Go for it, Liz.
Oh, no, I say I'm not going to say anything.
Okay, you're not going to say anything. So, no, that's all right. So can you guys see the optimal back office? Just wanting to confirm.
Yes.
Cool. All right. So what are we going to see inside RMS? Well, let's first of all go to browse for that taxpayer. Okie dokie. So we've just opened up the browse screen for that taxpayer. Where do you think we would see evidence of those cases?
Correspondences?
Might do. Let's have a look. Good question. Yes, so you can see here, there's a record of both of those, the tax clearance certificate that I just did and the inquiry and the extension of time. It says it came through the web channel. I'm not sure if this is the right, it's automatically saying it's come from the portal. I think this is GRA wording. We might talk about changing that because it kind of seems to link when you scroll out the whole thing here that it relates to social media as well. So that looks slightly wrong, but it's telling you that this came from the web channel. And if I highlight the first one, I can see down there exactly my message. You can see that. And if I highlight the second one, you can see the other message that I sent and the attachment. So yes, first of all, you can see a record of the correspondence in here. It's not very helpful though, because how do we know that it's come in? How did I know to go and even look there? There's no real way that I know that that those inquiries have come in to manage them. So the other place to look is in cases. Now we wouldn't look here either, but let's just look here for the purpose of looking in browse at the moment. So underneath this taxpayer name and number, 2 cases are also created. So you can see this one, which is the tax clearance one, which is 90, and the extension of time, which is 91. So inside here, we know there's a couple of active cases. Now, when cases are created automatically, though, it's not visible. They're occurring all over Optimal inside lots of taxpayer accounts, and we don't know where they are by looking in browse. So the correct place to find them is to go to case management. So let's look up inquiry cases in case management. There's a lot in here at the moment because I'm just going to sort them. And I'm going to sort it by the officer as well, just so you can see what the experience of the officer would be. So some of you might know Blair. Blair's been to Guyana a few times. If these 2 inquiry cases were allocated to Blair, so when Blair goes into his Optimal back office system on a morning or any time during the day, he'll get an alert to tell him he has 2 new cases. And when he goes into case management from here, he will see the new cases that have arrived. So these are the 2 cases, and this little envelope showing on this line here indicates that there's new unread messages in relation to this case. So the reason they're here is because they're brand new cases. But if he had opened it, let's open it, have a read. A little bit slow, sorry. So he's had a read of it. He's just going to close the case. I thought that little thing would disappear. I'm just not sure what step I need to go to for it to disappear. Then the envelope should disappear once he's actually read that transaction. Let's see. Maybe it doesn't disappear. I thought it would disappear. Every time, though, a new communication comes from the taxpayer in relation to this inquiry through the portal, it will show the envelope that's here. So let's answer that inquiry. We might answer it with another question. So he might decide that he wants to get a medical certificate from the taxpayer, for example, to be able to avoid penalties. So there's a couple of things he can do. He can send an email back to the taxpayer here, and this will actually email the taxpayer, or he can go into correspondence up here, and because it's a web-based one, he can send, sorry, I'll just move my window over. He can send an inquiry back to the taxpayer. Yes, sir. Please provide a medical certificate. Sure. And you can save that. You can see now we have 2 records in here. So the first one was the original record of the taxpayer, and the second one, was the communication going back. Go back to workflow. You can see the second one's been added here as well. So this is kind of just the running history of all the transactions that have occurred. And this is the correspondence. Sometimes they're one and the same thing, but sometimes inside here you might want to just add some working papers. It might be an internal communication, an internal note. So this just might be file note of some sort. Right during taxpayer. So you can keep a range of kind of records inside this. Let's see. So you're just really keeping a record of your communication inside the case until such time as you can finalize the case. So if we go back to the web, can you see the web now? Does that automatically show you that? Are you guys seeing the web version?
No, it's not being displayed.
Okay, I'm just not sure if I have to unshare every time, and I think I do. So I'll share the web one. All right. Cool. So if I go back into the web version, back into the taxpayer's portal, you see the taxpayer has one new unread message, and that's in relation to what I've just sent back. Oh, that's interesting. I don't want to add that one. So please provide a medical certificate to confirm your hospital stay. So that's the one that I sent to the taxpayer. The thing that's interesting that I didn't realize, so please don't do what I did. If you write a file note in there, at the moment, it looks like it's going to the taxpayer as well. So don't write a file note in there because that is a little bit problematic. Let me find out a little bit about that. I'm surprised that that does that. So, but it's immediately communicating back to the taxpayer the interactions, your request for additional information. So if we go to the inbox, we can see the same thing here. It's got the conversation stream occurring. Now, if the taxpayer wants to reply, here is my medical certificate. Sending the medical certificate through. Now we've got an additional chain going on of transactions. It's a little bit confusing because, of course, I'm logged into the web as Sharon, and I'm also logged into the back office as Sharon. So this here wouldn't, so if I'm Sharon here, it's unlikely that I'm going to be Sharon here. So let's just pretend that the back office is, Liz Bourne actually replying. So you'd get more clarity because you can see which one relates to the taxpayer or which one where this icon is relates to the officer. So if I stop sharing that one and go back to the back office. Hi, Chris, just saw you online.
Hey, Sharon, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Good.
So you can see this is the one here.
Hi, Tashana. Yes, we do. It's the one from the new link I sent today, right?
Liz, we can hear you. So you can see the taxpayer's reply with the medical certificate. This is the medical certificate here. I mean, it's not, we just put any file in there, but that correspondence has come back in. So now the officer can they've got the information they need, they can go and perhaps provide the taxpayer with an extension of time or confirm that, send them a letter saying that they can file late, do whatever it is to finalize that correspondence. If in fact they think they've done everything they need to finalize the correspondence, then the next task down here is finalize inquiry. If they want to send a specific request for further information, not just using the correspondence, then there is this little branch that goes off on the side where they can Input the information they require from the taxpayer. And it populates it inside this letter, that, you know, and it references the letter. This notification is in regard to the inquiry. This is the information that we need to be able to provide that, and you can email that to them from here. Need to email it. So that just provides a more formal letter format with logo, etc., instead of just the one where you're sending it just internally. So that sends it to their email address. All right, so let's say we've finalized the inquiry. We go save and continue. Type the outcome, medical certificate received. Okay, to allow time to file, whatever that is. Sorry about my typing. And in this case, in this particular scenario, well, in the GRA version of this case, you submit it for approval. Now, I think we talked about this another time, that if you've got a whole pile of staff that are quite senior and you trust their judgment around things like taxpayer inquiries, which is really just about giving correct information out, then in fact you can circumnavigate that. You can avoid that approval step by allowing some officers to approve their own pieces of work and allowing other officers to have to, and requiring other officers to have to submit it for approval. So that is a mechanism for being able to do that by just how you permissions. Once it's been approved, the last thing in the step of an inquiry case is just to send a notification to say this inquiry is now complete, you know, and thanking them for contacting, etc. So it's just a kind of finalization step. Again, that can be emailed or a letter sent. And once that's been sent, it closes. So the case has disappeared now. If we go to browse for that specific taxpayer, we'll see all the bits of the correspondence. Oh, that's not the taxpayer. That would be helpful, wouldn't it, if we found the right taxpayer? So you will see all the to and froing that occurred in the case also showing inside the correspondence. And then over here in cases, we'll see this one here, which is, which one? This one here, which is now closed. You can see the status has changed to close. Is it closed? Yes. It's no longer got an edit button, so you can't add anything to it now. You can see the history of correspondence in here, and you can see the steps in the workflow that the office has been through as well. The other case that we haven't looked at yet, the inquiry 90, is still sitting here active and assigned to Blair. So if we stop the share and go back to the web, I'm just gonna I'm going to log out and log back in just to make sure everything updates. I'm going to log back into the web. Whoops. Four. Remember which login I'm using. See, there's a number of new messages, and they're the ones that have gone back and forward showing there. If we go into the inbox, see the extension of time one is now moved from in progress, so it's no longer visible in the in progress list to resolved. And you should be able to see the notification around the inquiry being completed, the notification around the request for information that we sent. So there was a number of things that we sent in that process, and those are now visible to the taxpayer. Any questions? No questions? Have you got any questions in? Sorry, I'm trying to move my mouse to the right screen. Nope. All right. So I want to show you just a couple of other things. So that was an example of how inquiries from RMS Web, or Optimal Web, sorry, get created in the back office and then the communication between the two. But if you remember back to our flow chart, taxpayers can initiate inquiries in lots of other different ways, obviously. Face-to-face, phone, through correspondence, through email, and you will want to have a mechanism for recording those and managing those inside Optimal as well. So every time a taxpayer makes contact with you and initiates an inquiry of some sort that is relevant for you to keep a record of, then you record it using this taxpayer inquiry icon up here. Now, not everything is necessary warrants a record. Someone might ring up and say, you know, what time does the GRA office close? Now, clearly that doesn't warrant you keeping a record of that inquiry. But if someone's asking for specific advice and you give advice that's important to know that you've given that advice, or you want to keep a record of that that interaction with the taxpayer, then those are the sort of things you definitely need to keep a record of. So taxpayer rings up and they ask a question in regard to something that you can perhaps answer over the phone. So what ends up happening is this is the input screen for the taxpayer inquiry. We're just going to use this tin here. Now, if the taxpayer is a taxpayer and has a tin, then you find their tin and you select their tin. Then the next step in the process is an external step to RMS, but excuse me, but you record it in RMS, and that's verifying who you're talking to. So you want to confirm that you're talking to the taxpayer or an authorized representative of the taxpayer. Now, the mechanism that you use to do that is something that is kind of external to RMS. You might ask them some security questions. You might ask them for a letter of authority. You might recognize them and you know who they are. They might show ID. The letter might be on letterhead. You know, whatever your process is for verifying who someone is. Once you've verified it, you tick this box. You can see all the fields in the box are disabled until you tick this box. So really that's forcing you just to go through the verification step. You can see there's a number of fields here, but only 3 of them are mandatory. So we'll kind of work through the fields, but the only 3 that you have to complete specifically are mandatory. If the inquiry is related to a specific text type, you can choose the text type from here. If it's not related to a specific text type, then it will just default to all and you can just leave it as it is. The type of inquiry means how did this come, how did the taxpayer initiate? What mechanism did the taxpayer use to initiate this inquiry? So this is a list provided by GRA. Again, this list can be modified, but remembering some of them are linked to other things. So for example, this web channel one is linked, is used by Optimal back office. So if you change that, it would break the link between the Optimal web and the back office. But just for adding extra ones in here that don't do anything other than record the type of inquiry is fine. So let's say this one's a telephone inquiry. So that's mandatory that we know that. The reason it's mandatory is we use it in reporting later. And I'll show you the report that I'm talking about a little bit later on, because it helps you as an organization understand how people want to communicate with you, where the demand is, what mechanisms they're using, so that you can kind of start to manage your organization around those things. For example, you might have strategies to stop people writing in and phoning in, because actually dealing with a phone call is a lot cheaper than dealing face-to-face or dealing with a letter. So you might have strategies to drive people to certain behaviors, and then you want to be able to measure to see if they're successful or not. Or you might be thinking about putting in a call center in Georgetown. You want to know, well, what's the volume of calls we normally get? And this can help you kind of make those decisions. So type of call is telephone, and then subject, if you remember, this is the reason for the inquiry, and it's the same list that we saw on the Optimal portal, web portal. And again, it enables you to do a few things. It enables you to report on it, but it enables you to kind of organize your inquiries into groups as well, so that you can understand the sort of things that taxpayers are ringing up about. So let's say the taxpayer is ringing up because they've received an assessment notice and they're wanting to understand what it is. Now, RMS defaults to inbound, but there's also outbound. So you can use the screen to record things you might be sending to the taxpayer as well. So you only need to do that by, if you're wanting to record, for example, a telephone call, perhaps you do some soft calling around debt, and you want to record that you have rung the taxpayer to remind them of some outstanding debt. You can do the same thing as what I'm doing here, change it to debt if there's a debt one, arrears, make it outbound, and just record the fact that you'd made a phone call to them to talk to them about their arrears. So you can use it for outbound records as well. So put some information in here, that details the inquiry. So, you know, right, the director rang up to question why he had an assessment notice that says they now owe $50,000. So if I save, you can also attach something too if you want to attach a copy of something. So let's just say this wasn't a phone call, this was a letter. You can attach a scanned copy of the letter to this as well. Long save, there we are, save. So there's a copy of the letter there. You can delete it, you can open it and view it. Now, before I save a copy of this record, which I accidentally did before, well, now that I've saved a copy of the record, you'll see that it's given me 3 kind of red exclamation marks. That's because there's something I haven't done yet, and I have to complete one of these 3 fields. Let me explain what they are. The first one over here is completion date. Now, if the taxpayer has rung and asked a question on the phone and I was able to answer that question, I told them what they needed to know. That's not a great thing, but to write, but you understand the general concept. So you write what you told them, then you have completed that transaction. And so you put the completed date in. That means there's no further action required on this inquiry, but we did want to keep a record of this interaction. So if I click save now, it's not going to open a case. But what it is going to do is just save a record of that inquiry against the taxpayer's correspondence. So we've got a record that that interaction occurred. It's the one that I've highlighted here. Information in here that details the inquiry. I told them what they need to know. But no case was created because it was finalized. It didn't have to go through any further steps. We didn't have to hand it on to anyone else. So that's one scenario. And we talked about that in our flowchart earlier, when you just save a copy to correspondence. Second scenario is if, in fact, you can't resolve it then and there. So we'll just create another one. Whoops. We know who the taxpayer is. Remember, we need to verify it. Type of inquiry. So let's this time say it's an email. Sorry, a letter. And they're asking, please explain how these penalties work out. Might even be a phone call. Let's do another phone call because it's kind of easy. So someone rings in and they ask to see how they ask for someone to explain how their penalties are calculated. But when you're on that phone call, you go to look at those penalties and they're very complicated. So let's pretend that's the scenario and you can't actually answer the inquiry there. You need to do a little bit of work or you need to give it to somebody else who knows how to work out that problem. So in that case, you don't want to complete it. It's not completed yet. But what you do want to do is either assign it to a specific person, and that specific person might include yourself, or assign it to a group of people. So here is all the people who an inquiry case can be assigned to. So if I had, could include myself, I'm not on that list at the moment, but it should include myself as well. So if I want to take that piece of work away and work on it in the afternoon and get back to the taxpayer, then I can assign it to myself. If it's not the sort of thing that I'm meant to be working on, then I can assign it to somebody else if I know who specifically should be working on it. If I don't know a specific person, then I can assign it to a group of people based on their role or the roles inside Optimal. So this might be a piece of work that should go to taxpayer services officers. I'm on the phone, but I don't do the complicated stuff, so I assign it to somebody else. So I've assigned it to the group of taxpayer services officers, and what Optimal will do is allocate this, it'll create an inquiry case, and then it will allocate it to somebody within that group, based on how we set up the permissions. So if we save this one, the pop-up message at the end is slightly different to the last one that we did. You should experience it much faster than this. It's just the VPN that I'm working on back to our head office. So you can see this time it says a case was created. Do you want to create another inquiry? So the answer can be no again, but we'll this time find that an inquiry has been created. So if we go into here, and I'm just going to look up Blair again, because at the moment they're all getting assigned to him because I think he's the only one in the group. So if Blair went in again, he would, into his case management, he would see another inquiry has been allocated to him, which is this one here, number 92. So it's a new one. Please explain how these penalties are calculated. Now, he'd complete this case in exactly the same way, except that he's not going to be communicating with them on the web portal. He's going to be communicating with them through other mechanisms. So he might look up that taxpayer to find their phone number. He might ring them up and explain the penalties. He might prepare a letter to send them. He might email the answer to them. It doesn't really matter which mechanism he uses. Basically, he's been given this task and he resolves it in whichever way is appropriate, adds a record of what he's done to resolve it. So you might say, ring the taxpayer and explain the penalties 2020 ET. Yeah, it says happy with the so that might be all he has to do. And then he goes through the process of closing the case. The notes attached. It's not necessary to write anything more, just, you know, the supervisor can go back and read what he's done in that. And as mentioned before, it goes through the normal approval step, or if this seems unnecessary for certain officers, then they can be set up to self-approve. So the trick to remember is those three last fields, either completing it, assigning it to yourself, or assigning it to someone else. And just to recap, completing it means a case isn't created. So I'm just closing it. So we'll just recap, and then I'll show you a couple of other things that are worth remembering. So remember, it's these three fields. Completing it just records correspondence against the taxpayer's record, but assigning it to somebody or assigning it to a group will create a case. Assigning it to a user means it will go specifically to that user. And assigning it to a group means it will go to somebody within that group that's been set up. So taxpayer services officers will be set up with a role called taxpayer services inside the security. And so it will go to one of the officers in that group to resolve. Any questions? Interesting validations there. Saying I cannot complete it after the receive date because I accidentally mixed up my dates. So a couple more examples where it varies, just for you to practice, and then I'll give you a chance to have a practice. Sometimes a person will make contact with the GRA who doesn't have a TIN number, and their question might relate to whether they need a TIN number or something in relation to their obligations. So you can see here we've got two buttons, and one is registered, and that's the one we've been using, and the other one is non-registered. This means if you click that, it's no longer going to expect a TIN number from you. So this enables you to manage inquiries from people who don't have a TIN. And you'll see a number of fields in the screen have changed. First of all, you no longer have to verify the taxpayer because you don't hold any information about this taxpayer. So you're not in any way going to give out information about a taxpayer that's in the system. You can see it's allocated a dummy TIN number. So all our unregistered taxpayer inquiries get stored against this TIN number here. You can actually see them if you put that TIN number in browse. You can actually see all the inquiries, but over time there's likely to be thousands of them, so it's not particularly useful to go back and review them, but it is useful for reporting purposes. So because we may have to correspond back with this taxpayer, we need to capture some details about them. Now, if the taxpayer doesn't want us, if you can answer the inquiry there and they don't really want to give you details about who they are, then you don't really need to keep a record about them, because as far as you're concerned, you don't know who they are, and so it's not really materially useful for you. But if in fact you need to create a case to resolve this, because you don't know the answer, then it is useful to be able to keep a record of who it is so you can get in contact with them. So let's just say it's Mrs. Florence Nightingale. She's emailed in, and maybe she's got a phone number as well. She wants to find something out about taxpayer. Do I need to register if I am doing ironing in my back room of my house? I earn $200 per month. All right, so she's emailed in to ask a question. You don't know the answer, and therefore you need to either allocate it to somebody or assign it to yourself. So in this case, it pretty much follows the same steps now. The only thing that has different from before is that you need to capture who the person is and some contact details of them, so that whoever you assign it to can actually get in contact with them and answer the question. So we've done all that. We've done everything we need. It's got some mandatory fields in there that we saw before. You definitely have to have one contact point and the name, and then the standard contact mandatory fields below. So this is just going to create a case. The fact that it's kind of got no taxpayer attached to it doesn't really matter. If we go to case management, we'll find that case. It will have been allocated to somebody, so that person will have been notified that they've got a new case. Whoops, it's not a registration case, is it? I'm trying to just sort it in the right order because there's so many of them. Normally, an officer wouldn't have this many open cases. Here we are. So here's the case here. So it's been allocated in this case to Callista Miller. And so she's managing that case now. So when she goes into her case management screen or into Optimal, she'll be notified that she has a new case. She'll be able to go inside, see what the inquiry was, and by going into here, well, she can see the contact. She can see the contact details here as well, but she can see the details here as well. I don't think, just off the top of my head, I don't think this will pick up her email address. I'm not sure. No, so if you then go to email or respond to her, you'll need to populate the details back in again. It doesn't actually populate immediately from that screen. So again, just do the normal process, resolve it, telephone her using a phone number, email her from in here with the answer, and then save and continue and finalize it through an approval step. Any questions?
Hi, Sharon. Yes.
Yes.
Say, for example, the tax advisory sent me an inquiry case and
Yes.
it was not supposed to come to me. Can I reallocate that case to whoever?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
How many times should we?
You can reallocate it 1,000,000 times if necessary. There's no limit to it. So for example, this case here is allocated to Kelly in our team. So say she says, nah, actually, it shouldn't have come to me, because of course there is a bit of judgment that has to go on about where things go if you're going to allocate them to people. She may say it should actually go to Jono, one of our Jonos. And so all she does is she can actually allocate it by going up into allocation and reallocate it, assuming she has the permissions to do so. So I'll just revisit the permissions briefly with you in a minute to remind you case permissions. We've looked at them before, but just to remind you. But yes, it can be reallocated from there. I don't think it can be reallocated to a group. No, it can't be. It can just be reallocated to another individual. And once that's saved, that will then, if we go into, make sure it's saving properly. So if we go into the case here, we can see it's now allocated to Kath. And if we went into case management and looked for that particular one, inquiries, and we put Kath's name in, we'll see that case is now moved from whoever it was before, can't remember, to across to Kath. So now she's managing it. So yeah, you're going to find that particularly with inquiry cases, because they are kind of, they're going to be scattered across the organisation, quite possibly, that they may have to move around a little bit if it's gone to the wrong person. So you can reallocate that way. Any other questions? You can set up your permissions. If we just look at case permissions for inquiries. So this is the case permission screen that we've seen before when we did security. So if we go to inquiries, at the moment I've got mine set up so cases only get allocated to taxpayer services officers. So what you can do is you can have it so that all the inquiries, and this is around automatic creation of them, so the ones that get automatically allocated, all the automatically allocated ones that come through the portal get allocated to taxpayer services officers. And then if we gave, so this is the column that says cases are automatically allocated to people, auto allocate. So at the moment, cases, according to this matrix, are automatically allocated to taxpayer services officers and supervisors. I'd probably get rid of the supervisors, just to officers. And then you may want to include everybody here in cases can be allocated to them. So these people can then allocate cases out to different groups, because you might have inquiries around examinations that should go to examination people. But you don't want those people getting things in the first instance through the automated allocations. So there's a little bit of thinking about how you might want to set up your permissions. For example, you might want all of them to come to the supervisor, and the supervisor allocates them out, as an example, because the supervisor might want to allocate cases out based on skill, based on workload, based on tax type, etc. So there's kind of a number of mechanisms about, particularly in relation to inquiries, about how you'd set them up. Yeah. If the drop-down list in here, this drop-down list here, assigned to group, is completely linked to that screen, that security screen we were just looking at, this screen here. So in fact, it will only show the groups that have permissions to have cases allocated to them. So they work very closely together. So you guys can manage all of, I mean, GRA can manage kind of how this is all set up to meet your requirements. And I would kind of suggest that you keep it tight to start with, so that all inquiry cases are limited to where they go out, but then over time you work out kind of who needs to have them and who needs to be allocated them, and then you kind of branch out your permissions a little bit over time. Any questions? Just to show you one other thing. So this is the admin screens, and I'm not sure if we've looked at these too much, but these are the configurable fields that that somebody in GRA can update. Now, that doesn't mean everyone can update them. It means it sits probably in system administrators to update fields. Now, some of these fields, when you update them, they have impacts on other areas of Optimal, and some don't. And these are the two that relate to correspondence. And I talked about them as we went through. This is the list of ways that taxpayers initiate inquiries. So we could add a new one in here. Pigeon mail. And now, as soon as I went to taxpayer inquiries, here, you'll see pigeon mail has been added to the list. So if in fact you all of a sudden want to start recording things in a different way, so for example, you might want to start recording, I don't know, applications that come through into a Dropbox, then you can quite easily add a new field into here to be able to record that and see how many come in that way. The thing to remember is adding things is not as serious as deleting things. So you may not always be aware what all these fields are used for. And remember, this one here is currently used to record portal inquiries. So if we change that, even if you change, I'm not sure, but even if you change the wording, that might actually break the code that's creating the cases inside back office from the portal. So you do have to be careful about those sort of things. Adding things often doesn't cause as many problems as changing or deleting things. So things like that, I mean, most of you as trainers won't have to worry about that. But if you're involved as a system administrator, it's particularly until you get really confident about how Optimal works, it's a really good idea to just chat with us about anything like that, just to make sure it's not going to break anything. Having said that, say you're not using interactive voice response, that was just kind of an idea, but it hasn't happened. You can just make it inactive. There's no point keeping things on lists that people have to look at regularly if one of the options is not actually valid. So if I toggle between active and inactive, you can see I've now made that one inactive. So it means when you go into inquiry, that list, that item on the list will disappear. So things that you don't need, make sure you actually do turn them off on lists like that if they don't have any impact on anything else, because it just makes the whole user experience much easier. So you can see interactive IVR is actually gone, makes the list shorter, makes the list much crisper, makes the list more meaningful. The other one on here that we referred to earlier as well is the correspondence subjects. So this is the list of subjects at the moment. I don't think these, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think these subjects actually interact with anything other than our reports. So I don't think we drive permissions of them. I don't think we say anything that is named subject arrears has to go to a debt team. I think they literally just recorded data just to identify and group. We do categorize things inside reports, but I think we do it in such a way that it doesn't matter if you add something on here. So if all of a sudden you had a new initiative going on, like we referred to as before, you can add it on there. You'll see it's now included in the list. And if I go back to taxpayer inquiry, see that populating in our subjects over here. COVID's been added into our subject. Now, again, most of the time for things like this that have no real interaction, the code, it doesn't matter what the code is. You can see, I mean, if you look at other examples, it'll give you a suggestion as to how best to set it up. So in this particular case, we can see that there is no special codes that are being used in any way in our code that matters. So in those sort of situations, I just write the same thing again. Code and description are the same. This over here will be description on this list. So you don't want to write really long things like because all of a sudden it kind of doesn't. See, these are actually kind of more descriptives rather than descriptions. So, and the other thing I'm really fussy about in these sort of things is you want to make sure things continue to stay in the right sentence structure. So, you know, don't all of a sudden add all caps, not caps, or not punctuate. Just erode the quality of your system by having it all mixed up like that. So it's nice to have things in a good format. Any other questions about inquiries? A couple of other things. I keep having other things. I'm sorry. There's two more things that I can think of at the moment that I want to show you. Just trying to get back to browse. Sorry, I just want to get that admin screen closed. Too many screens open. Okay, so we're back in browse now. So I've gone into browse and I've selected Academy, Umbrella Academy. Now, one of the things we talked about was correspondence. So when you do a taxpayer inquiry up here, and then when you interact with the taxpayer through the case, all of those things end up in correspondence. Correspondence is kind of like a running commentary of every interaction we've had with the taxpayer. You can send emails from here as well. So if you're wanting to, you can use the screen in a similar way that you use taxpayer inquiry, but you can't generate cases from here. So this is really just putting a record on correspondence. So I used an example here about outward bound calls. You could use this to record something here, but like a lot of kind of IT systems, they give you a couple of options. So you can also do it from in here. So when I clicked add down here, it popped up the screen, and now I can just record something that will populate here. Outbound call regarding outstanding tax. Project 2020. So you might just want to put a record against the taxpayers account here under their correspondence of that phone call. And so this is really just to keep a running commentary. You can also use it for more internal things. Again, it's not for moving pieces of work around. It's just for recording things against the taxpayer. So for example, this could be an internal comms, so it's just about account. Please note at this taxpayer has aggressive tendencies, right? And a big dog if you are visiting. Now it's just a file note really. All things, and again we just put a file note up here. So people can have a look at that if they want. So that's how, so correspondence works very similarly to taxpayer inquiry where you don't create a case. Now the last thing I'm going to show you is reports. There is one taxpayer inquiry report in here which is quite useful to have a look at the same time. It's called Taxpayer Inquiry Statistics Report. We'll do the current month, I think. There is a summary, a report that has a little bit of detail on it, and then there is an export report, which exports more granular detail. At the moment, the export report is not delivering what we need, so it's just gone back for rebuild, but we can have a look at the summary report. Export lists give you kind of they give you a spreadsheet with a lot of detail on it that hasn't been summarized in any way, but then it enables you to use it to kind of in Excel pivot tables or graphs or to do some filtering and sorting and analysis to kind of work out information or queries that you might be wanting to find out. So this is like a summary report. So for this month, I'll tell you, we can see what it's telling us. So for this month, of all the inquiry cases, or all the inquiries, and I have to have a think about whether it's cases or interactions. I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head. All the inquiries are broken down into a couple of graphs. So this tells us that actually the majority of our inquiries came in through email. So 37% came through email. And 20% came through our web channel, so online portal. 17% came through letters. So you can, over time, you can kind of see what the trend is, if things are becoming popular means of communication. If you're definitely wanting more people to use your portal, your optimal portal. So you're wanting to see this one grow. Really, it's about understanding the cost implications of each of these and making sure that people are using the mechanisms or the channels that you want to drive them to in terms of communication. So this one here is just seeing for the last month. This one is trending over the last 12 years. It's 12 years, that's a long time, 12 months. So this report's only started to be run since July, so we've only got the last 4 months, but you can then see the month trends. Now, it depends whether you're in your reform journey, you're trying to drive up people coming to communicate with you or drive down. Different organisations are at different places in that journey, really. So some organisations, like the New Zealand IRD, for example, is definitely in the mode of trying to drive down taxpayer inquiries. They're wanting to make sure that they make everything accessible for self-service. So there's a lot of information on the website. It's very difficult to contact them. Your portal has a lot of information. So they're really wanting to see numbers drive down, but you might be wanting to drive engagement with taxpayers. If you're kind of in a phase of driving engagement with taxpayers, then you might want to see your inquiries going up and seeing how that they're in contact with you, becoming in contact with you. So here, for example, we can see a big jump in face-to-face contacts. You can also kind of map this against projects or media strategies or mail outs. If all of a sudden you start sending statements of account out to taxpayers and it drives your contacts up, it tells me that a couple of things are happening. One is taxpayers are responding to the statement of account, which is great. They might be ringing up to make payment because now they see how much they owe. Or 2, they might be disputing the statement of account because there might be data in it that's incorrect that all of a sudden has been exposed to them. Or 3, they might be confused by the statement of account. And therefore that tells you some information about improving your statement of account so it's less confusing. So depending on what you're wanting to achieve, this can kind of give you the information that helps you understand how they're contacting you and the trends over time. This one here breaks down per site. Now, at the moment, we're only using the head office site, but it can also help you understand how different people are interacting with GRA per site. So it's the same numbers represented because it's all one site, but we should over time see this broken down by sites. Berbice, Baraka, a range of Parika, a range of different sites, and how many different types of inquiries they're dealing with per site. And also what the types of inquiries are. So this is actually a breakdown here of the type of inquiry. The one that we've got here is other. But if it was a range of other things, we'd see them in there as well. So this report actually gives you some quite good information to help you in terms of managing inquiries. My expectation is the export report, which will be an Excel spreadsheet, will break it down to every single inquiry, when it occurred, how it was resolved, how it came in, what site, might even have some closed, open statuses. It might even have some things like time to resolve the inquiry. So we're still working on that export, but that should be part of this package by the time we go live, I think in February. So I reckon we have a bit of a break. Should we have a break until 8 o'clock, and then you guys can come back and practice doing some inquiries, and Chris and I can hang around and answer any questions you've got. Does that sound like a plan?
Just a quick comment. I like the fact that you actually have the reports, even for this module, actually have some useful reports that could drive organization decisions. So I thought that was commendable that it's actually built into the software.
Thank you, Lavina. We have spent quite a lot of time working on our reports more recently. It wasn't one of the stronger points of the product a few years ago, and we've invested a lot of time into trying to give some useful reports. That one has some, it has some good information, but it's also in quite an accessible manner, graphical, so that it's easy to kind of get a feel for it. If you're wanting to do any more in-depth analysis, then the export one should be good for that as well. Just need a little bit more skill to be able to drive pivot tables and do organizing of data and filtering and sorting of data. So yeah, I mean, those reports are really critical to be able to drive decision making and help you understand taxpayer behavior. Thank you for that feedback. Any other questions or comments? So I suggest, it's too fancy for me to put up my little coffee cup like Jono. I'm sorry. He's got this great picture. I probably could work out how to do it. Of sharing his screen with a coffee cup on it. But shall we come back at 8 o'clock, in quarter of an hour, on the hour, whatever that is for you? Is that 4 o'clock? 3 o'clock. On the hour, and then you guys can just do a few inquiries, just see if you've got any questions, and I will hang around as well and answer any questions at that point. But feel free to practice now. I'm just going to go and refuel some drinks for myself, and I'll be back on the hour. Sound okay?
Yep, 3 o'clock it is.
Okie dokie. Thanks.
Maybe it's okay, but it's okay.
Hi everyone, I'm back. So if anyone is wanting to do anything, I suggest you create an inquiry, perhaps starting with the back office, so you don't have to flick between two systems. Create an inquiry, perhaps do one where you complete it in the first sitting, do another one that you assign it to somebody, and then go in and find the case and complete the case. And if you've got any questions, I shall be here ready to answer.